Okay, hey everybody, and welcome to the 19th iteration of our node operator community call. We've got a really fun agenda today. So we're going to start off with Sasha, who's going to give us the Validator set updates and an update on the Stakers Guild event that happened in Brussels during ECC. Then we're going to have Dima, who's going to give us an update on CSM Testnet, which is now fully live and permissionless. Will, who's going to give us an update on the simple DVT expansion. Really quick intermission, and finally, we're going to have Sasha give us a quick intro to pre-comps and how contributors to Lido DAO are thinking about potentially integrating pre-comps with the Lido protocol. And the Chainbound team is going to give us an intro to Bolt, the pre-confirmation protocol that they're working on. So Sasha, whenever you're ready, please present your screen and get us started with the Valley Stream updates for this month, or for last month, rather.
Hello everyone. Yeah, actually during the last Node Operator community call we covered May updates, and today is July 23rd already. So I'll try to summarize everything that happened over the last month and a half. So, okay, starting with changing the slide and the, I would say, community side of things and Lido staking tribes. So this is an initiative with the primary goal of bringing more net new solo stakers to like Ethereum in general and to CSM in particular. Like to understand this idea like of the initiative, we can like try to see what we have in Ethereum ecosystem right now, like what is the current state of affairs. So the first fact is Ethereum needs more solo stakers. All right, the second one, the barriers for becoming a node operator are quite high. And the third point is that there are a lot of organizations in Ethereum ecosystem and people who contribute to these organizations. So these organizations want their contributors to be experienced and to have like a hands-on experience in Ethereum validation and to somehow indicate their alignment with Ethereum. So the idea of this initiative is quite simple. And it basically addresses all the points I have mentioned. So Web3 companies or like organizations can provide hardware funding for their contributors to run CSM validators, and it helps, firstly, to bring new solo stakers by lowering the costs of running a validator. Secondly, it makes their contributors more experienced in Ethereum validation, and basically it clearly indicates the alignment with the Ethereum decentralization track for these organizations. So Lido contributors are the first who are about to start participating in this initiative, and they already started getting their dApp notes, as you can see on this screenshot. So if your organization who are interested in participation, definitely reach out to our community lifeguards. You probably know them, Sam and Isaac. So next up, collaboration with local crypto communities. Over the past months, we've had a great progress on supporting them, on educating and expanding these communities. Some of the proposals were just approved and funded. Some of them has already shown their results. In short, I can say that almost each proposal is focused on three main things. So the first one is engaging community members by like offline events and meetups. Second one is creating educational materials for these communities. And the third is translating these materials to local languages of these communities. And like, even though, as you can see from the slide, all these proposals might look similar, they all have like unique features, unique aspects, and of course, unique audience and like unique community. So here, just a quick heads up. In June, we started hosting bi-weekly roundtables with our community members. The format is not the same as for this call. It is hosted on Discord, so everyone can be involved in discussion. So if you want to join, stay tuned for the next announcement that will be also on Discord, obviously. Getting further, a summary of what we did at FCC. In short, we were having fun. More concrete, Will talked about our effort in decentralizing the Lido node operator set at the main FCC event. Easy participated in the panel discussion about solo stakers' impact on Ethereum. Then we had an awesome party at the church and hosted our very first event for solo stakers and community stakers. And I hope most of our listeners managed to participate in the Stakers Guild event, but I'll walk you through the main highlights of the event anyway. So during the event, we activated the permissionless phase of CSM. We discovered different ways of joining CSM using plug-and-play tools, and we looked at possible use cases of using DVT on top of CSM. So we've met more than 150 people. We've had lots of beers and burgers, and we made a small giveaway of new Lido branded dApp notes, as you saw in the second slide of my presentation. So huge thanks to all who joined us. You really made this event very special. Thank you all for your vibes and for your feedback as well. So, and of course, I can't wait to see you at the next solo staking event that probably will be at DevCon. Who knows? So, the last slide, module updates. Again, as last time, we have separate sections for simple DVT and CSM stuff, but two main things I cannot avoid mentioning because I am too excited. So first one, simple DVT is expanding, and second one, CSM is live on testnet. And now, when I've already spoiled the main announcement, I can pass the mic to Dmitry and Will, who will tell you a bit more about all this. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sasha. This is really, really great synopsis. Dima, whenever you're ready, share your screen and give us the updates on CSM Testnet.
Sure. Thank you so much, Easy. And without further ado, let's get started. So, status update on the CSM testnet. And to start with, let's start with the roadmap. So the testnet was launched in July the 1st, like 23 days ago. And it was launched in the early adoption mode, a mode when only proven solo stakers can join with a reduced bond. But not long time before, after, on July 11th, the testnet was transitioned to a fully permissionless mode. And as you can see from the diagram, the same approach is expected for the mainnet. So at the moment, we are at the stage where the testnet is live and fully permissionless, and anyone, like literally anyone, who is able to provide at least 2 ETH of a bond to run your very first validator is able to join. And if you are already a solo staker and you're included in one of the lists either by StakeAt or by Rated, you can probably even join with a discount. So make sure to check it out. And speaking of a roadmap further, people frequently ask me what are the next steps? And the next steps are as follows. We believe, as a group of contributors working on community staking module, we believe that in November 2024, we will be able and will be ready to propose CSM for the mainnet. And if you are wondering what we are waiting for, why we are not launching it right now, the answer is simple. First of all, we need to make sure that everything works properly, and we need to test it on a testnet. Secondly, the security audits has to be done, and they had already started, but it takes time to perform them and to make sure there are no vulnerabilities, at least discovered vulnerabilities, but I hope none at all. So mainnet launch is expected in November 2024 in the early adoption mode. So again, only proven solo stakers or solo stakers from the rated list, from the stakecat list, or solo stakers curated by Lido, including testnet participants with a decent performance, will be able to join. So if you are looking for the mainnet, make sure to join testnet now and perform well during testnet, and it would probably give you an entry ticket to the mainnet. And the final step, since community staking module should be permissionless at the end of the day, once all of the community stakers, all of those curated stakers are already there, already in the module, then it would be time to switch the module into a fully permissionless mode. And it would most likely happen either in Q1 or Q2 of 2025. So that's it about the roadmap. And now let's take a look at the numbers regarding the current testnet. First of all, we have almost 180 node operators. And I'm saying approximately or almost because new operators are joining every hour, maybe not every hour, but very frequently. And it's hard to be precise with this number. So something around 180. All of them combined together are operating 1.5 thousand validators on Haleshki testnet. And it all happened just within 23 days since the launch of a testnet. Also, by that time, 3,900 test STETH is locked as a bond and rewards within a community staking module on a testnet. We do have 5 testnet-ready integrations, including DAppNode, Stereo, Sedge, ETH Docker, and the recently arrived and recently developed ETH Pillar, which also seems to be working absolutely amazing. And the final touch here is that since the start of the CSM testnet, within the CSM testnet channel in Lido Discord, more than 1.2 thousand messages has been sent, including various topics like requests for support, requests for clarification, sharing of the emotions, just fun memes, or announcements, or any other stuff. So if you want to get involved into this thriving community, make sure not only to join CSM Testnet, but also to join Lido Discord. And now let's talk about the cases that has already been tested on a testnet, since as I said before, the main purpose of a testnet is to, first of all, allow people to give the product a try and to get their hands-on experience with CSM. And on the other hand, the second important thing is to actually test things and to make sure that every feature, all the bits and pieces are working together and working properly. So there were many cases tested. There are many more to be tested, but I want to specifically focus on 2 of them. The first one is MEV stealing. So since the launch of the CSM testnet, 2 cases of MEV or EL rewards stealing were detected. If you are wondering what MEV stealing stands for, it stands for a violation of a Lido block proposer rewards policy. Simply speaking, any block proposed by Lido validator with either MEV rewards or EL rewards directed to the invalid address, so not to the Lido execution layer rewards vault, are considered to be blocks with MEV stealing. And in these 2 cases, for both of these cases, MEV stealing penalty was applied, but in one case, contributors were able to reach out to node operator, and it turned out that that was not a stealing at all. That was just a result of a misconfiguration of his setup. And due to that fact, node operator voluntarily decided to compensate for the losses to the protocol using a dedicated method for it, and no additional penalties or measures were applied. However, in the second case, there were no chance to reach out to node operator because he never disclosed himself or never replied to the message in the CSM testnet channel. Hence, the penalty was proposed for confirmation and was confirmed by EasyTrack Motion. And as the result, all the funds that were missed due to this fact of MEV stealing were burned from the bond, as well as additional fine, as well as bond curve reset, meaning that if this operator were to join CSM during early adoption period with this discounted bond curve, after the confirmed fact of MEV stealing with no compensation, he will lose this curve. The second point and the second case that I want to focus on is slashing, because CSM is fully capable of handling this very unfortunate situations. However, on a testnet, this situation is not really unfortunate. It's just a good test case. So one CSM validator was slashed due to user mistake. And right after that, once the slashing was detected, it was immediately reported to CSM using a permissionless method powered by EIP 4788, and 1 ETH initial slashing penalty was immediately applied to compensate for the losses of the protocol users, which is pretty good, I think. And later on, once the slashing period will end, which lasts for 36 days, all of the remaining penalties would also be confiscated. And there's, again, as I mentioned before, many more cases to be tested, but these two cases are probably the most important tested so far. And I would like to report that everything works absolutely fine and as described and as desired. On top of the testing, during testnet, we are collecting feedback from the users. And according to the users' feedback, the initial version of CSM Quick Start Guide was not that easy to find and understand. That's why we significantly updated it. And by scanning the QR code above the CSM Quick Start Guide name, you'll be able to go to the operator portal, and at the very beginning of this page, you will see an easy and straightforward guide. Also, based on the test cases and the user experience, Lido contributors prepared several explanatory guides. There would be much more of them in the future, but for now, you'll be able to read more about MEV stealing, about slashing, and about how to subscribe to the alerts, very important alerts for the CSM operators, within this guides. And as Sasha mentioned, and she even showed you this picture multiple times, these DApp nodes that were used for giveaway during Stakers Guild that were distributed or about to be distributed to Lido contributors will also be soon available for sale in a DApp node store. So if you are on the market for a very, very decent validation hardware branded by Lido, make sure, and you are looking for probably some extra benefits like early adoption entry ticket, maybe. In this case, check in DApp node store to get yourself one of the DApp nodes, but be fast because the first batch is 10 units only, and who knows how fast they would be sold, and who knows how long would it take to produce the second batch. And my last point here would be very simple. If you haven't joined CSM Testnet yet, make sure to join. I mean, today is a great day. Tomorrow is also a great day, and any day after. But the best day is definitely the closest. So when you will go to csm.testnet.fi or you will scan the QR code on the screen, you will see this simple 4-step guide, which also includes a link to a more detailed quick start guide. But if you don't want to mess with all this stuff with setting up this client, that client, connecting them together, and the other things, you should definitely check out one of the integrations, because with the integrations provided again by DAppNode, Sage, Serum, Eve Docker, and Eve Pillar, the process is super seamless. It literally took me 15 minutes using Eve Docker, probably the most sophisticated integration in terms of experience required, to set up everything for CSM and joint testnet. So if you are a bit of an experienced user of a Linux, use Eve Docker. If not, use any other integration which will allow you to do all the things super easy and smooth. Again, join testnet. I'll see you there. I'll see you in Lido Discord. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Dima. And next up, we have Will, who's going to be telling us a little bit more about Simple DVT. I feel like this is probably the segment that we've had repeating the most often. It's almost like our very own Golden Girls, I guess. So yeah, Will, tell us about Simple DVT. Is it on testnet? Is it on mainnet? Is it on both? What's going on?
Glad to be part of the Golden Girls. So for this month, we've updated the status to we are scaling. I think this is going to be a pretty consistent theme that you'll see over the next few updates as well. I think in general, things are really exciting for Simple DVT where they stand. So diving into OBL to start, the scaling process for normal clusters is well underway. So the first 12 cohort 1 clusters that have been active on mainnet now for about 2 months are all running 40 validators each, and all the performance metrics look really, really strong to date. So we had gone from 5 validators to 20 to 40. The 20 to 40 was sort of just a precautionary step, but everything looks great. So we would expect an updated performance report to be posted to the forums next week, and that will likely come along with a proposal to raise the key limits for those clusters again. This performance report will cover things like uptime, validator effectiveness, as well as block proposal success rate. So stay tuned for that. The first 10 cohort 2 clusters, so these clusters within cohort 2, there's actually 14 total. The first 10 have a pending easy track to raise their first key limits to 5 validators each. We'd also expect the remaining 4 clusters to have an easy track started this week for their first 5 validators as well. As a reminder, the onboarding for cohort 2 began after cohort 1 had finished their first 30 days with the initial performance report. So in general, all of the clusters that have been so far proposed by the Lido node operator sub-governance group and accepted by the DAO are in the process of getting their first validators up and running and really rolling. There's a total of 540 validators active within the Simple DVT module on mainnet today. Currently, most of those are OBL, but we will talk about SSV, and scaling is really picking up there as well. In terms of the 4th testnet, which is taking place with OBL, which we've covered, I think, in the last couple of calls as well. So still underway with 25 clusters. There are 150 net new node operators participating. Some of you may remember that the testnet had some issues early on. This was due to the large number of validators that are active on Haleski, as well as some like strange interactions basically between clients. Given this large number of validators on Haleski, combined with the fact that we're testing 1,000 validator keys for the first time. In the meantime, OBL has released v1.0 of the Charon middleware, which is extremely exciting for the OBL team. The testing is underway, and we'd expect, as things are looking quite good, that we'll start updating clusters on mainnet very shortly. There's still some specific clusters having issues with block proposals that we're diagnosing, though it looks like those are generally due to operator misconfigurations. The block proposal success rate for testnet over the last week is 83%, a bit above that. So in general, things are looking really good here, and we'd expect that the 4th testnet is wrapping up. Once that testnet is wrapped up, it will be followed by another Lido node operator sub-governance group evaluation of the participants, and they will propose additional clusters to move forward to mainnet in what will be OBL cohort 3. So more to come here. On the side of SSV, extremely exciting. All 12 clusters in SSV cohort 1 are now active as of late last week. They're running their first initial 5 validators, and the performance monitoring period, which I sort of touched on for OBL, has begun on the SSV side. Once that performance monitoring period is done in about 3.5 weeks, there will be a performance report shared to the DAO. And if that performance looks good and comparable to the overall operator set, you'll also see a proposal to raise their key limits and also start to onboard the 11 cohort 2 clusters on the SSV side. Performance so far looks very, very promising. Currently, there have been 3 out of 3 successful block proposals, and a huge shout out to the Agile Antelope cluster, who had the first block proposal and actually already has 2 of these block proposals of the 3. So things are looking really great here. We will be officially confirming the testnet date to participants that have applied later this week, but it is expected to start on August 5th. So for those of you that have been interested, please look out for an email over the next few days, just giving confirmation around this. But yeah, this will be the last major SSV testnet that takes place via Simple DVT. And for those that are not participating within this testnet, like we definitely would encourage you to check out CSM and get involved there, because there's a lot of opportunity to run DV validators on CSM. At the bottom, I wanted to call out just a little screenshot from Rated that I took. You can see on the far right that the Raver effectiveness rating for Simple DVT is 96.93%. This is still just like a small amount of validators. That number of validators will be increasing, which we'll touch on. But it's pretty cool, because if you compare that 96.93% that was over the last 7 days to the next, to all of the largest staking protocols, Simple DVT is performing better than 5 of the next 6 on the list by network penetration. So DV validators are working, they're performant, and they're providing lots of benefits to both the Lido node operator set, but also to the overall Ethereum network. All right, in terms of the expansion, so there's 2 pretty major initiatives that are taking place. First is that the vote to raise the target share, the actual on-chain implementation of that vote, has gone live today via Aragon. So as a reminder, there was a snapshot vote about a month ago that passed that allowed for 2 things. One, it allowed for basically a qualitative signaling from the DAO to say that the target share should be raised from 0.5 to 4%. And 2, for the implementation of what are called superclusters. So the Lido node operator subgovernance group met last week and came together with a proposal that is on the Lido research forums to propose 10 superclusters for onboarding to mainnet. Superclusters look quite similar to the normal simple DVT clusters that are currently running. So they'll still have 7 total participants running in a 507 threshold format. But these clusters will consist of 2 types of node operators. It'll consist of advanced node operators and then members of the curated node operator set. For the curated node operator set, these are node operators that are participating within the curated module. For advanced node operators, basically this is just a classification that means that these node operators have been observed on testnet and mainnet with strong performance. This includes solo stakers, it includes community stakers, and it includes other professional node operators that are not part of the curated node operator set. In addition to the 70 participants within these 10 superclusters that were proposed, there's an additional 28 node operators that were also proposed as backups for these clusters, as well as potential backups for regular clusters over the coming months. And these backup node operators are also added to the advanced node operator list. It's expected over the next couple months that there will be follow-on evaluations of participants in mainnet DVT to also classify them as advanced node operators. The main focus by the LNOSG for this initial setup was to get the supercluster proposal out the door. But as a reminder, this was stated in the initial Simple DVT proposal. Any cluster that runs more than 100 validators needs to have 50% of those participants be classified with this advanced node operator label. With the capacity of the module going to 4%, it's possible, across many different ways, that the number of validators across normal clusters could be increased. For example, if the total amount of stake within Lido increased, 4% is a larger number of ETH that could then be translated into larger number of validators for normal clusters. So we would expect to see more advanced node operators basically classified for this reason. On the side of the superclusters, there's a pretty detailed post on the research forums if you'd like to check that out. There's just a couple of screenshots there highlighting some of the onboarding statistics, but onboarding is expected to begin later this week. The clusters will start with 50 validators each. That'll be followed by a performance report 2 weeks after all of those validators are active. And if that looks good, they will have the ability to have a proposal basically for the key limits to go to 200 validators. That process will repeat after another performance report, and superclusters will run up to 500 validators. So in general, Simple DVT is scaling, it's expanding. The performance looks really, really great on mainnet so far. And it's on track to running a very material amount of stake across many different solo stakers, community stakers, and non-Lido curated node operators. So all in all, I think very, very exciting, and we'll keep you updated next month. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Will. And actually, as of a couple of hours ago, the Aragon vote increased Simple DVT share from 0.5% to 4%. just went live. So if you've got LDO and you're interested in seeing that state capacity for the module increase, please remember to vote. All right, next up, we have a really quick intermission for those of you that are or check out the recording a little bit later. All right. So first up, we're going to have Sasha, Lido DAO contributor, tell us a little bit about the approach that Lido DAO contributors are considering around pre-confirmations. And then we are going to go on to Chainbound, who's going to present us both. Sasha, whenever you're ready, please start.
Okay, hi. Quick introduction. I'm Sasha. I contribute to Lido Research. I've been thinking about pre-cons since, well, based rollup since November. I just want to set the stage a bit in terms of like, you know, what like researchers within Lido seem to have consensus around. We are very worried about long-term centralization pressures of precons. As such, we think inclusion precons are worth experimenting with. But the execution precons, we need a lot more research and deep thinking there, especially on actions we can take now that kind of have implications that that are hard to unwind. So that on the execution precon side, we're thinking we want to move extremely slowly and do more deep research. The inclusion precon side, we see limited risk on that side, but still treating it as an experiment, something that should be opt-in only, and something that can be reversed if if there are centralization issues or things that end up detracting from Ethereum centrality. I think like going even further, I think we see that this only makes sense if it can increase Ethereum censorship resistance. So if there's some ability to also experiment with some sort of inclusion list around these things in a way that doesn't crowd out. I mean, in a sense, I think the pre-conf use case should not crowd out the inclusion list use case, and we need to think deeply about that. But this infrastructure can be extremely complementary, and my hope is it can lead to experimenting with inclusion list type designs that can then feed back into the research. Yeah, so like this is to give you an idea, we only want to like push or take steps that are absolutely non-coercive towards node operators, are aligned with Ethereum's endgame, and actually increase Ethereum censorship resistance. And yeah, with that, I'll let Francesco and Jonas talk about Chainbound.
Yeah, great. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, you're good to go.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Francesco, one of the co-founders here at Chainbound, and we're currently focusing on developing Bolt. Bolt is a protocol that's aiming to unlocking proposer commitments, and as such, starting from inclusion pre-confirmations. Yeah, we're going to just cover very quickly what is Bolt, why we're building Bolt, what are the components from a node operator perspective, and how does it work, and then also a quick roadmap that we planned. At a high level, Bolt is a protocol that will enable credible commitments from the proposer side. And the main aim of Bolt is to improve Ethereum UX and censorship resistance. Obviously, this is we're taking a phased approach here, And our first credible commitment in here is going to be inclusion pre-confirmation, which means a pre-confirmation on the inclusion of a given transaction, specifically useful for non-MEV transaction, as for example transfers, approvals, and around 80% of the transactions that are currently being sent to Ethereum every day. What is the ultimate aim from a node operator and validator perspective for Bolt is that it's aiming to increase the block space value, as the validators and the node operators are going to be able to do more with that. And there's a new sort of primitive for users to work with, and for users, dApps, applications, and so on. And ultimately, obviously, higher increased block value means potentially a higher yield. And yes, so in terms of like high level features that I think are important to touch on of this protocol is that it's obviously an out of protocol solution. It leverages restaking for economic assurance, meaning we don't introduce any external or new trusted entities, as for example a relay or so on, but rather we use economic assurances to prove the validity of a commitment that the proposer is doing. Most important, and also is compatible with PBS, meaning that there is no really opportunity cost on the yield generated from this that would be eaten by the PBS upside that's given by the sophistication of block producers. There are also a few design principles that I think are important to stress here, that divide into four main categories. One is trustless. There are no new trusted entities that are introduced in here. As we said before, it's credible, and because it's proposer-centric, and meaning that we provide a delegated solution, meaning proposer can delegate to an external entity, and we're going to touch on it later, but we aim to give it a sort of complete agency to the proposer to what they aim to do. And it's permissionless, so any proposer can opt in, and as Sasha said, we are in an experimentation phase, so obviously we're happy to talk with any proposer, any node operator interested in this, but it's going to be fully permissionless, the opting in and out of this protocol. And finally, as we said before, it's compatible with the current pipelines of PBS and so on. Why Bolt is open source, and you can find it on the repo in the Chainbound GitHub. And why we're doing it open source is because we as a company are focusing on speeding up the development of this new primitive that are proposer commitments, and in particular inclusion information. And we believe that doing it in open source is by far the best way of doing it, and also utilizing the great support of this community. We're also doing open source because we're settling on standards. There is a lot to discuss. There is a lot of things that could be I would say, pivotal to the development of this protocol, and we really appreciate people that provide discussion material onto the table. And Bolt has a whole section in the GitHub where you're going to see discussions that are open on specific topics, as for example delegations and so on. And also because, as we said, yes, this will allow to collectively refine architecture and the trade-offs that we're making here. Speaking of trade-off, building a pre-confirmation and a commitment protocol, proposer commitment protocol, obviously has different trade-offs in its designs. We have this two-dimensional world in which we're looking at highly efficient or highly trustless setup. Right now, as Bolt, we are in a very, I would say, trustless setup, and a very trustless setup, which would mean fully proposer run actions with no delegations or like delegation from opted in for the proposer side, and proofs checks at every level of the stack. And we're going to touch on proofs later, but this is just a high level understanding of the trade-offs. But we could move on this in this bidimensional, I would say, area where there are different trade-offs that are made. And for example, there are other protocols which instead could opt in into something which is like proposer connected to just one relay. It's fully exclusive and relay run auction. It's not really the pathways we want to go, which is here, the yellow example, but it's something that again, such as this open design space would give to to protocol engineers that are looking into this space. Where we want to be ideally over this months of development is on this axis, obviously. So have something that's highly trustless and highly efficient is obviously an ideal world, but we hope with the help of the community and also really understanding the different key stakeholders here, we can get there. What is the end goal? Here, I'll leave it to Jonas.
Right. So yeah, this table is split up into Ethereum today, Bolt V1, which is the current, the next release, and then the Bolt endgame. So currently, if you're looking for an inclusion confirmation on your transaction, you have to wait 12 seconds. With Bolt, we want to unlock faster confirmation times for these types of transactions. And that's something that Bolt V1 currently can give you. We also want to unlock credible proposer commitments, which are broader than just inclusion pre-confirmations. There are various other commitment types that we're experimenting with or are willing to experiment with, such as the ones listed below, partial block building, block space futures, and derivatives. Those are things that we think are very interesting to explore. We also want to provide better rollup support, be it based or otherwise. If you look at the current blob market, there are a lot of inefficiencies there. But if rollups can get better guarantees from proposers through proposer commitment or similar tools, they can get better settlement guarantees, faster inclusion, and stuff like that. So moving on to the next slide. I want to quickly touch on the components. So there's a couple of off-chain components and a single on-chain component that's very important to touch on. The Bolt RPC is the first one. It's essentially an RPC proxy server that propagates pre-confirmation requests or commitment requests to opted-in proposers in the look-ahead. This is what users interact with. And it is important to note that this component is trustless. It is a fully opted-in component that, if run by some sophisticated entity, will take care of security, denial of service attacks, and etc. But it is not a requirement to run Bolt. Then next up is the Bolt sidecar. It is the entry point to the off-chain Bolt infrastructure, and it implements the commitments API. The commitments API is how users request commitments from proposers, and the sidecar will turn these commitments into constraints. These constraints are necessary because, as you all know, a large amount of Ethereum block building is outsourced. And so there needs to be a way for the proposer to communicate constraints to the block builders to make sure that any commitments they made are in fact honored by the builder as well. For that purpose, we also have a modified MEV boost because the traditional MEV boost client does not support this functionality. And the functionality is implemented by the constraints API. Now, the constraints API, I'll touch on it later, but it's fully trustless. It verifies these constraints using proofs. So that's again one of the things that we're very adamant about, the trustlessness and not relying on external entities. Then moving on to the on-chain part. So we have the registry, which is a smart contract that keeps track of opted-in proposers and their associated stake. As Fra mentioned, we rely on economic assurances, be it from regular stake, restaking, or anything else that provides credibility to these commitments. On the right, you can see a quick diagram. The black boxes are what is currently unchanged, and the red boxes and arrows are what will be changed. So from a node operator perspective, the only thing that will be required to change is the addition of a Bolt sidecar, a modified MEV boost, but the core infra remains the same. The beacon node should only point their builder API to the sidecar instead of directly to MEV boost for this to work. So there are two interfaces. Between the user and the proposer, we have the commitments API, and between the proposer and the builder, we have the constraints API. The constraints API, to dive a bit deeper onto it, it requires some changes to the traditional builder API and relay APIs, but it will allow proposers to impose constraints on builders, where builders will then have to generate proofs of constraint validity. This allows this component can in fact be used in a standalone way to implement something like inclusion lists, where a proposer wants certain transactions to be included, and it will force the builder to do so. Next slide. So let's quickly run through a flow. So the user can send their pre-conf requests. We're talking about inclusion pre-confs here, to the Bolt RPC or directly to the proposer. In this scenario, we are using the Bolt RPC. The proposer will simulate and accept if the constraint, if the commitment is valid, the commitment, and it will sign it, making it binding. So it will then return a response to the user and forward these commitments as constraints to the relay. The relay will then store these constraints, again, forward them to the builder. And the builder is now tasked with building a payload. But not only that, now they also have to generate these proofs of constraint validity. So they submit their block with the proofs back to the relay. The relay can then validate the bid and verify the inclusion proofs. And then when the proposer finally has to propose, they call the header with proofs endpoint to get a block with the proofs. Then they can validate the proofs and only then sign the header. And this is done in a fully trustless way. So the Bolt sidecar is, again, as mentioned, the most important part of the off-chain infrastructure. Some of its core functionalities are simulating these commitment requests to make sure that the proposer does not commit to anything that it cannot fulfill. So think about enough balance, a high enough nonce, and a high enough base fee. It will then sign these commitments with a binding key. And with a binding key, I just mean a key that has access to some collateral, so that this commitment can also be used as a slashing device in case any commitment was breached. It returns responses back to the user. And in the meanwhile, it will also build a local block template in the sidecar itself with the signed commitments. I should note that this is not a very resource-intensive process. It's just adding a list of transactions that you committed to, and yeah, just storing that temporarily. Again, it also turns these commitments into constraints and communicates them over the constraints API. And then also importantly, we added a local fallback block mechanism in case PBS fails to deliver a valid block. So you can imagine if you commit to making a commitment and PBS does not come up with any block that satisfies these commitments, we want to be able to provide a block locally that does support these commitments. So that's what the local fallback block building logic will enable. Then to quickly touch on delegation, Bolt can potentially run in delegated mode. It is not something that's supported right now, but we're actively looking and talking to a lot of people about this because from a sophistication standpoint, some of these commitments might introduce additional complexity, additional infrastructural problems, or just sophistication in general. And if proposers wish to do so, they should be able to delegate this. This is useful for proposers that have a trusted relationship with a sophisticated entity. But again, we want to highlight this is a trusted relationship. It is very hard to attribute faults in this relationship. And so we want to be very careful about this, but we want to provide the option. Okay. I can quickly go over commitment types. So why can't we just support all of these now? A couple of technical reasons. So commitment breaches must be provable on-chain for objective slashing. Objective slashing is something that we're, again, very adamant about because it requires no trust assumptions, no additional trust assumptions. And EIP 4788 allows us to do a lot of that. There's also some more meta reasons. So we call it the credibility upper bound, but essentially, you can only give a credible commitment with certain economic stake behind it. And so some of the commitments essentially fall above this stake that proposers can provide. So they're limited by the economic collateral behind them. Proposer sophistication, again, as mentioned in the previous slide, maybe delegation solves some of this. What are the trade-offs here? We're actively investigating all of this. And then high network participation, some of the commitment types, specifically ones related to execution, which are, again, as Sasha mentioned before, quite tricky and dangerous potentially. But they would also require high network participation, potentially adding to their risk of centralization. Okay, I'll move it to Francesco.
Yeah, thank you, Jonas. So a high-level idea of like the roadmap. Where are we now, and what are the next steps? Where are we now? We have a POC of Bolt, as we said, in the repo that you're gonna find it under Chainbound organization on GitHub. And we've been contributing to a few devnets that have been live. The first devnet was actually just run by us. Then we joined the Zoo Berlin devnet with a few other teams in the space, between validators, between validators, block builders, and relays. And then we also joined the Helder DevNet, which was the HCC DevNet, again, to showcase the functionality of Bolt. In terms of community and in terms of participation across the ecosystem, we're trying to collaborate with really anyone that can help us on the research side, on the development side, on the testing side, and on really driving demand and driving adoption, both on the supply side, meaning on the validator side, and on the demand side, meaning on building, moving wallets, moving applications, and new utilization of inclusion pre-confirmations. So to name a few, we applied to the Lido Alliance as a collaborative part on the supply side. We're working with 20 Squares. We're working with Shutter, with Commit Boost, Switchboard from Nethermind, with Spire, and Symbiotic. I'm not going to mention the exact ways of how we're working with everyone, but mainly I would say majority is on the research side, meaning understanding really how, for example, a new commitment type would work, how the signing scheme would work for given node operators, and how different use cases of this would work. And finally, for the staking protocols, how we could make something that is agnostic, but it could also work with majority of the risk-taking solutions that are currently available. What are the next steps? The next steps is we are in, I would say, the core protocol development right now. We are working on the registry smart contract. We're working on the RPC, and we are finalizing the sidecar, which are, again, the core parts of Bolt. And also, we're going to have a few announcements soon. We're going to have the official Hello World of Bolt. Right now, we are on a soft release, but we're going to have a official announcement soon. And also, we are planning to go on Holesky in early September and potentially mainnet in early Q4. Again, these are tentative deadlines with many, as you all know, dependencies and things that still needs to be done. But again, I hope this gives clarity to all of you. Finally, a small call to action here. If you're a node operator interested in integrating, reach out for cohort 1, which is, again, our first cohort of node operator interested in joining. And we're also looking to build a workshop, to run a workshop for node operators interested in credible commitments, because we really need to understand the trade-offs here and how things work from a node operator side. So I'm actually gonna send it here, the link, so everyone can have access, I think. And this is just a form that whoever is interested will help us making the workshop come to life. Finally, we have a small demo, but I think we're out of time. So I think this was all, and thank you again for the Lido DAO for giving us the opportunity to showcase Bolt and what you can really bring to Ethereum. And again, with the objective of bringing a new primitive, which are proposer commitment to life.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot both for the really thorough presentation. We do have some time for Q&A. I don't see any questions in YouTube chat, but if any of the viewers, especially node operators, have any questions, definitely let us know. In the meantime, I think, oh, apparently messages containing links aren't showing up in chat. Okay, so I'll have to log in with a moderator account to fix that. But we'll definitely add the survey link in the description to the YouTube video. In the meantime, I'll try to post it in chat. While I do that, Sasha, if you want to ask the guys any questions, and then I have one or two as well.
Yeah, I mean, one question I have, I guess, is I've heard you've been, well, I know you've been quite excited about pre-comps as a way of fixing inefficiencies in the blob market, and I'd be interested if you could double click on that. Like, how do you see pre-comps helping blob inclusion?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is actually one of the things that we're researching right now. So maybe as some of you know, that there are some inefficiencies in the blob market. There are a couple of reasons for that, but one of them is essentially latency. So if builders want to include blobs, they have to pay an additional price in terms of latency, in the sense that blobs are very large, and so these builders are bidding in an auction where they want to update their bids very fast. And if they have to include blobs, it will slow down their bidding, essentially, and reduce their chances of winning an auction. So that's part of it. And so rational builders will try to minimize, or not minimize, but they will sometimes try to avoid including blobs because it increases their chances of winning the auction. Because there are so few builders, this has very noticeable effects on blob inclusion. Some blobs sit in the mempool for tens of blocks, while they do pay enough and should technically be included. That is one part of it. The other part of it is related to network latency. So this was PBS latency. Now we're talking about network latency. Blobs take quite a bit longer to propagate than regular blocks without blobs. So a blob is 128 kilobytes worth of data. You can potentially put 6 blobs in a single block. But obviously there is a deadline to when these blobs should be received by all of the validators on Ethereum, which is 4 seconds. That's when validators should make their attestations. If you include 6 blobs, there is a slightly higher chance that you might miss that deadline. And so for proposers, first of all, that's not great. Some proposers play timing games, which kind of exacerbates these effects. But on the other hand, this again makes builders not want to include too many blobs, because if their block gets reorged, they miss all of the block value that would be sent to them if the block were to be accepted to the canonical chain. And so one way you can potentially fix that is if you go directly to the proposer to request the inclusion of a blob, you can modify the PBS supply chain in a way where the builder does not have to constantly re-upload the blob and resend the blob to the proposers. And that would free up additional latency and potentially make the auction more efficient, while also making sure that blobs get included much more quickly, because you essentially remove the decision from builders as to whether to include blobs or not. You move that decision to the proposer, which I think is one example of where proposer agency could be very, very beneficial for the network in general. Let me know if that answers your question. Willing to expand a bit more if you want.
Yeah, thank you. No, for me, that's very clear. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Sorry, I was hunting for the unmute button. I did have one question that I wanted to ask. So I saw in the slides you guys ran through earlier that eventually you want to work on like partial block building as a part of the protocol. Do you guys think that this is something really, really important in terms of like potentially reducing the current builder centralization issues that we see? And if so, how do you think it's going to accomplish that? Or is it kind of like, it might be something that helps a little bit, but won't necessarily offset builder centralization due to things like private order flow?
That's a good question. So the way I see it, there's a current problem with essentially the allocation, the monolithic allocation mechanism of building rights, in the sense that there's only one builder that can build the full block. Which means that if a builder, for example, is specialized in sex-dex arbitrage or top-of-block arbitrage, they might be less, they don't care as much for including anything else in the rest of their block, right? So there is a sort of differentiated block space between top-of-block and rest of block. And so I think a very interesting avenue of research is, what if you allow one builder to build the top of the block and another builder to build the rest of the block? Would that make more sense? Like, can each of these builders sophisticate or specialize in their own kind of avenue? I think it would open up the space for more competition, because you'll have sophistication on different parts of the block. And so, yeah, that's, I'm not sure yet, but I think it would help partly with builder centralization.
Really interesting. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other questions right now, but we did succeed in finally getting the interest form posted in the YouTube chat. Apparently, if you're not like a channel admin, it doesn't let you post links. I guess that makes sense. If there's any more questions, we'll definitely throw them your way. We're anxious. I guess like the community node operators are definitely interested in figuring out what different kinds of ways that might be able to opt into pre-conf protocols, first on testnet and then eventually on mainnet. So hopefully there will be more information and discussions about that stuff on the Lido forums in the coming weeks. And I think that wraps it up for today. The recordings and the segments will be made available as usual in the coming weeks. We hope that everybody enjoyed the show, and we'll be back next month for the next node operator community call. Thank you everyone for joining, and thanks a lot to Chainbound for presenting Bold.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.